So if you guys want to come up in the front, I have seats. Okay, we are good to go. So I'd like to ask everyone in the room, I know there's a lot of sponsors that are still chatting. And how about a round of applause for our sponsors? Because we couldn't be here today without our sponsors. But if I could ask everyone that is in the room, I understand there's probably good chatting going on, but we are streaming this and the chatting in the background, if you could take it out in the hallway, that would help our stream. We have about 100 people that are watching the stream. So if I could ask everyone to, again, I'm politely asking everyone to quiet your voices. I don't know how you say that politely. No, I can't say that. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming today. One of the things we've been doing for the past couple of years since post-COVID is in each city that we travel to 28 different cities. We pull our local audience and we celebrate about 20 people in that industry, just acknowledging your hard work. And the people that I'm going to announce are the people that have been, they came in through our polling, and we want to appreciate them today. So, and I know some of the people have left. David Rizza, he's a senior manager, InfoSec for Accenture. David, are you here still? Come on up, David. Yes, that would be great. All right. Thank you, David. All right, I have Dana Siddharth. She's an information security compliance manager from Carvana. All right, congratulations. I have David Richards, Security Operations Center Supervisor from Grand Canyon Education. Congratulations. I have Derek Cunningham. He's Vice President, Security and CISO for Script Pro. Congratulations. I have Juanita King as Information Technology Security Engineer from Arrivia. All right, congratulations. I have Kevin Rohrer, who's the Director of Security and IT at NICE Healthcare. Kevin, here you go. Congratulations. I have Ryan Dinnan, who's the Information Security Analyst at American Express. Congratulations. I have Stanley Spears as a Senior Cybersecurity Analyst at Loan Depot. Stanley? Yeah, I had a feeling Stanley left. All right. Timothy Rollins, are you here? Timothy is a principal information security engineer and from Albertsons. Paul Mashak is manager of information security from American Express. We love our American Express attendees. They support so many of our virtual events. Chief Cybersecurity Strategist and CISO from Click Solutions Group. And our moderator today, I have Kane Eustace, Chief Technology Officer from Bluebell Behavioral Health, another one of our panelists today. Thank you. And I have Demetrius Combs, CTO from Sovrn. Many of you guys may know him. He was the CISO at GoDaddy for years. And so very happy to have him here today. Keith Stocks is VP, Third-Party Cyber Risk Management, Transformation and Governance Leader at State Street. Thank you, Keith, for being here today. And last but not least, Michael Manrod, Chief Information Security Officer, Grand Canyon Education. All right, congratulations to everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Wynn, and she is going to lead the panel. And we want to encourage you all to, if you have any questions, please interact with our panelists. Do you guys need this mic? Sorry, guys, they need this mic for questions. So if you have any questions, please wait for my team to come. We need to have you on mic for our virtual audience. And for my virtual audience out there, if you have any questions, put it in the chat box, and we will definitely make sure that the panelists get your questions. So once again, let's welcome our panelists.
And before we start here, let's have a round of applause for Kim and her team for putting on this great event. We're going to take a moment here just to reintroduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Rebecca Wynn. If you look at me on LinkedIn, I actually do CISO work for Click Solutions Group, my own company. I host Soulful CXO, which is a weekly podcast talking about the heart and soul of those in our industry, so please check that out. As well as if you want deep dive in events, I do Threat Watch every month for Bright Talk.
Demetrius Combs. I'm currently the CISO for Sovrn, but for 7 years prior to that, I worked at GoDaddy, 3 years as the CISO.
Mike Manrod, CISO for Grand Canyon, and passionate about teaching and that side of things.
Didn't want to nail them. Keystock, State Street. I'm a ex-CISO. I've gone into recovery and I've finished it now. We're not going back there again. I deal in third-party security.
Kane, Eustace, Bluebell Behavioral Health, Casa Grande. We're passionate about helping veterans, Native Americans, and those in need from a mental health perspective. Also, before that, 5 years ago, or for the last 5 years before this, I was with GoDaddy as well. So.
I still have a GoDaddy account. Me too.
And Keith and Kane, if you guys can use that mic, we won't strangle each other.
Yeah, we can do that.
So let's get to the first question that's on everybody's mind, and then we'll go to Dimitri. So what about SolarWinds and with the CISO? What do you think about that?
You go first. I know you're passionate on this one.
Yeah, I mean, who in the room has noticed that it's hard to find people to take top security jobs, right? Like the positions stay open for a long time. There's a lot of people who want it, but it's hard to find the right people. Locking people in prison for mistakes or fining them or making them felons for mistakes does not necessarily seem like the way to fix that problem. I mean, I definitely think there needs to be accountability. We need to be held accountable for our actions. If we're doing poorly, I feel like we should be replaced if we're CISOs. But if the standard is to look back 3 to 5 years, as what happened with Jeff, as what's happening with Tim Brown, if the standard is to look back, apply today's standards to the past, and then apply criminal responsibility for mistakes that are out of the realm of what a CISO actually controls within an org, I mean, I think it seems like a recipe for making the security problem possibly worse, not better.
So I'll add to that if they're going to hold CISOs accountable, they need to make us what's called Section 16 employees, just in case you guys don't know this. Like, that's what the CEOs are, that's what the CLOs are, that sort of thing. They get protections from the company. They get things called D&O insurance. They get golden parachutes and things like that. But if they're going to hold us accountable, then we need to be in the board meetings, not just with the audit committee. Because there's a bunch of decisions that get made in those meetings, and then the CISOs get held accountable for it.
Kane or Keith, do you want to weigh in on this?
I was just going to say I'm lucky enough because I'm on the ground floor of the company that I'm currently at, and I am part owner of it as well. I get to be able to be one of those ones in the board meetings making those decisions. So I could not imagine from a security perspective to be able to protect your company if you're not actually being able to sit in on those meetings and actually have those conversations with them. They're not going to understand what's truly going on. You're not going to understand what's going on. You're going to have a comm breakdown, and then that's going to create a problem, and eventually, I mean, good chance of a breach at that point. So,
Kane, do you have anything you want to weigh in before we ask Frank to give his thoughts?
Yeah, I think they need to look real hard at the governance model. That CISO reported to somebody, and normally it's been really micromanaged. So that hasn't came out yet. it will probably come out in the future, and more people are going to be held responsible, we can only hope.
So in light of the SEC charging, going after the CISO, how do you feel about how the SEC watered down and diluted their new cybersecurity rules? Because before they were published and they were out for comment, they actually had requirements for the board to have someone on there, like they do for the regular board. You have to be a competent at accounting. But they took all that section out, and they just said, you need to have a cybersecurity plan. But they took all the rest of the wording out that would have required cybersecurity training for the board.
So it is a good question. I mean, when we look at the idea of having a security representative on every board of every publicly traded company, who really is a board level of experience, there really aren't that many of us. I mean, like everybody'd have to be on like 10 boards for just adequate coverage. And we would stop doing security work because we'd be in a lot of bunch of boring meetings none of us want to be in. You know, a lot of us. So it's it's kind of a catch-22. I agree with your point that if you're going to be accountable at that level, you should have that level of reach. But a lot of security folks don't necessarily want it. So I don't know. I think they probably had to adjust that because I don't think anybody was going to comply with it even if they mandated it.
One, Night Dragon, they're an investment firm that invests into cybersecurity companies. They just released a really good white paper on this exact subject about how many boards actually have anybody with cybersecurity experience, and it's like 4%. So just trying to pull where are they going to get these people to do that, first of all?
And I was talking to some people earlier today that I applied for a new CISO job, and then they asked me if I would take $115,000 to be the CTO in the CISO, and I told them what sand they could pound. They did a reevaluate HR on how much they should give me. But one of the things I noticed when I was looking at them and I started asking them, one of the co-founders, they told me, as I was saying I was going to take the job, no way, was also the CIO. So again, being any good person, I started massively Googling the heck out of that person looking back. They're an academic. So what do you guys think about the requirements for the board? Besides being a CISO, one of the things I see is just because you put an asset tag doesn't make you a CISO. Just because you own a company should not make you a CIO. Just as you wouldn't do that for a CFO. What do you guys think about the requirements of the board? I think that's the one thing that we need. We almost need a union. Yes.
Well, I was quite fortunate because one of the board members was a geek. And she was a great proponent of getting me funds for security. But yeah, without that one person having the knowledge, even after another healthcare plan breached, I would have not got the money to get it done. So at least one person on there has to know what you're presenting, even if you present it at the dumbed down level. Someone has to understand.
He's like, no, don't give it to me. Kane, did you have a thought on that?
I mean, I would just echo the thoughts that were already shared on that, but absolutely, I agree with you 100%. Having some knowledge of knowing what's going on from a cybersecurity perspective on the board, and just because, again, you own the company doesn't make you the CTO, CIO, or anything else. Might make you the CEO if you're lucky enough. But that's just a title you hold because of that. I'm lucky enough, I have a CEO that at the end of the day, she does understand cybersecurity because I've sat with her, I've taken her through trainings, and she's been receptive to what's going on. And so she'll listen when I sit down and I say, hey, we need this at the end of the day because otherwise we're leaving this particular portion wide open for attack. And this is how much it's going to cost us if it does get attacked. And usually that'll perk her ears up, so.
I think part of it goes to how we're organizationally set up. You as the Chief Information Security Officer to report to the CIO, to report to the CTO, to report into General Counsel, to report into the CFO, to report into the CEO. Personally, I report into every single one of them, but not the CEO. And I have an issue with reporting to a CEO who can't give me time. But one thing I realized on every one of those is I've had really good people who really sponsor me well, and I've had people who didn't know how to sponsor me, and one of the questions I have is how do you go ahead and ensure that those reports of risk, of gaps that you have, and how you might not be aligning with contracts, how you might be having other issues along those lines in your code, how can you assure when you're so far down the org chart that those reports are actually getting reported to the people making the decision? I personally have walked away from 2 positions because the risk, and I was communicating them, was not getting wrapped up into those mainline reports, where then I was going to be held personally liable. And it was like, deal with it. Well, here's my resignation, but I know not everybody will do that. So how do you guys see that and how we're reported in the org chart and also being an issue?
So first, I do think we need to get CISOs out from reporting under the CTOs and CIOs because it makes it too technology driven. Second, to my point earlier, like CISOs have to be reporting to more than just the audit committee because that's the mechanic that you have to make sure that you have visibility to the real problems in the company. But if the audit committee's 6 people and the rest of the board is 11, and you don't get to communicate to the rest of them, or in another meeting, one of the other C-suites is, downplaying the things you told the audit committee, you don't get the counter at all. So you have to be in all the rooms, which is my point earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reporting structure can vary, right? Like, I've seen just about every structure work. I think it depends on the org, but the dotted line, to your point, needs to be to the board. I mean, if it's the audit committee, but the rest of the board's always there, that's probably okay too. But yeah, if it's like a shadow and then there's no opportunity for dialogue, that's there. But I think one of the main things we need, if we want board engagement, we need to do a better job of taking our technical problems, converting them to business language, and breaking them down in ways our board members understand. Because what I've found is when they understand the issue and it's well articulated, concise, not full of lots of jargon they don't need, they make good decisions usually, right? Like the boards of most companies want those companies to be successful. And I think a lot of times risk decision-making fails on the communication side. And that rests with us.
That leads into risk appetite. Uh-oh. Waving. So one thing I've been learning is the risk appetite. What is that of the organization and how security fits into that? And that's how we've been getting our funding. It has nothing to do with talking about security to start talking RCSA controls and evaluations and how it affects the business line and then how much it's going to cost them to fix their deficiencies. We talked about that pretty much all morning. But at the end of the day, it's the risk appetite, how much they can accept, how much they're willing to accept, how much they're willing to pay to negate the risk acceptance.
Can we get a whole of how many of their companies actually have a clearly defined risk appetite?
We do.
Yeah, we'll do that in a minute. We have a question here in the back.
So I wanted to talk, you mentioned requirements, right? And with the challenges the SEC stuff is putting out there, and we already know that so many CISOs have fallen into the roles because they were great at what they were doing, but to your point, Mike, that you mentioned that they don't necessarily have that knowledge of presenting to the board or translating to business problems. How do we address that? I mean, because we don't have any type of standardized training. There's a couple of certification programs that some of the universities are starting to put together, but how do we address this as a problem? Because honestly, the pool of qualified CISOs that are out there today, it's getting diminished, especially the ones that are going to be gun shy about stepping into a new role because of the risk.
I think one of the key things that I have found, and I have mentors like Teresa Payton and Jim Roth, a lot of guys know them, is every sector and every company is different. And one thing what I try and do when I walk into a new company is who can really be my sponsor versus a mentor. A sponsor is going to be there day in, day out and try to set you up for success. And I would just tell you myself, I don't think we're really good about finding out who is going to sponsor us. So when you talk about the board, if I go to company X, what presentations to the board have been successful in getting through to the board to take action or understand? Operation has that, finance has that, maybe new business has that, but we don't always do a very good job of asking them to help us. And can you guys go ahead, and if I have to buy you the Starbucks after work, can you guys listen to what I was going to go ahead and say with we get a half hour, right? We get 2 minutes, maybe if you're lucky, on how that could be impactful, how it can be changed. That's the one thing I see, and I would just say personally, I think like the 6 quadrant is pretty good. So what are those 6 key areas? But tie them into, as we said before, not only the enterprise risk management, but how is not handling these going to affect your contracts? You know, you have a $60 million contract that says that we are going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're not doing it. We could still choose not to do that by going back and renegotiating the contract, but tying it back to the business that way. And so the 12 PowerPoint slides, the 22 PowerPoint slides, it ends up being gobbledygook. But I try to gear mine more towards customer success, the business lines for me. But Keith, how do you do it? Or Kane, how do you do it?
Well, I'll just say right off the bat, I mean, at the end of the day, when I sit down and I have a conversation and it's me and my CEO and we're sitting in a room together along with my VP of Business Relations, we'll have the conversation of how is this going to affect business? Is this going to affect us being able to operate? Does this affect us being able to take a contract with the VA potentially? The DOD, does this affect us at the end of the day being able to go direct with the tribes? So it really comes down to whether or not for us, our biggest thing is HIPAA compliancy, and we're headed towards high trust. That's our goal for next year. And that's the number one thing we've thrown our budget in. And so everybody is on the same page as far as that goes. We're in lockstep. I have the benefit of being in a smaller company and being able to do that from the ground up. I know not everybody has that nicety or that option to be able to do that, but I can tell you when you're in lockstep, when you can get into lockstep, if you can make that happen with a good chunk of your department, whether it be your security side, your operations side, your finance side, if you can get them in lockstep with what the mission is to protect the business, you're going to be a whole lot better off, and they're going to be more receptive going forward and understanding that this is where we're headed. But again, I had the nicety of being able to sit down with them, have the conversation, and they both take security very seriously. So I don't really have to convince them too much.
Yeah, I was going to go. All right. I guess on this subject, I'll say 2 things. I got lucky the first time I was CISO. A good friend of mine actually knew Steve Katz, famously known as the first CISO. We spent so many hours together. One of the things that he communicated to me was take the time up front to sit down with the board and align what are their goals and what are your goals for security. Because if they're not aligned, there's a really good white paper out there from Synopsys called CISO Tribes. It's a really great way of like, if you look at it like a maturity model of like, security is a cost center, security is compliance driven, security is a tech enabler, security is a business enabler. Even if you can just get alignment on that with the board, that will give you what you need to then say, these are the traits as how I'm going to define it. Doesn't mean you have to use some, like sit down with them, define what the traits of a business enabler are, define what the traits are of a tech enabler are. Once you have that defined, align to it, and put it to a standard score. Put it in this CSF, put it in CIS, doesn't matter. Get it there so that way you have a way to justify the funding and you have a common language with your board to work with.
Well said. Rich, it looked like you had something.
Okay, I'm an old guy, but I have a very simplistic view of this, and it has to do with role and scope of the CISO. Let me give you some examples. If an employee does something wrong, do they fire HR? If a department manager screws up his budget, misappropriates fund, do they fire the CFO? No, it all comes down to who owns the data, who is responsible for advising on security. If the CISO is responsible for advising on security and the departments own their data and accept responsibility, then when something goes wrong, who do you fire? In my case, in many of my companies, I created what I call a RAF, a risk acceptance form. If I found a risk, I went to the department head and I said, I got this, we have this problem. It's your data. Do you want to accept this risk or not? And of course, first thing they say, well, what if I don't sign this? I said, don't worry. I'll take it to your boss. And what does it mean if I do sign it? Well, it just means that if this thing happens, I won't be the only one leaving the company.
And how has that worked, Rich? I mean, has anyone else had it where there was data that got breached and the person who accepted the risk, such as a marketing person who really didn't know what the application ran, that they took the axe, or did you see that someone else took the axe?
Luckily, I didn't ever get to that point because in many cases, once they understood their responsibility, and an earlier presentation from the city of Phoenix where they meet with each department head, I used to do that. In the beginning, I'd meet with each department head. They love egos. They want to tell me how important they are. So later when I have a risk, I go back to them and tell them how important they are, and here's their data, how important it is. And I would get them to either sign the form or go with me to IT to get the thing fixed.
Yeah, to add to that a little bit, kind of along those lines is, you know, if you have an exception program, so you have your security policy in place, you have your security standards in place, then when somebody violates them, they have to file an exception. You take that exception all the way up to, if it's in a business unit, if it's a separate company, have the CEO or the general manager of that, they have to sign off on it. And if they counter you as the CISO, your next audit committee meeting, you put their name down. Here's the exception. This is what the CISO said to do. This is how the business overrode me. That's the only other way you're going to get that type of protection.
The other thing about risk acceptance is 8 out of 10 times, like I'm talking to like a director or somebody, a mid-level manager, and of course I demand the risk acceptance of at least 1 to 2 levels up from them. The moment we bring in that EVP or whoever has to sign that, they're like, wait, why security says not to do this and you want to do it anyway? I'm not signing that. So I find like 8 out of 10 risk acceptances stop the risk before it happens, because bringing the visibility causes people to not make the bad decision to begin with.
It's a great side effect of an exception system too.
Then on the other side, you've got, it goes up to that executive and says, how much is it going to cost me not to sign this? It's all about business to market. So you've got both sides of the coin depending on your governance model.
One thing I've done adding to that form is, what does the CISO think? So do I agree with the risk exception based on the information, or do I not agree with this? And like for me, then the CIO or CTO, whoever reported to, they might counteract me, but it's part of permanent record that I disagreed and why I disagreed. Potentially that would save me in a court of law. But, yeah, but let's do a pivot. What do you guys think about ChatGPT, generative AI, and how are you training really C-suite more than anybody else at times, and staff to be responsible users of that data? Because right now, anyone is saying it used to be 8 to 12% a couple months ago of your corporate data is streaming out to these platforms that is wide open to the web, and good luck on getting them off. Now it's closer to 12 to 15%, which probably means it's double. So how are you guys handling that, or how do you advise people to handle that, besides crying every night?
I have a fun one for that, actually. So my VP of Business Relations, we sat down the other day and we were working together on the website to create a chatbot to a certain extent that would be able to have the patients go there, say, hey, am I looking for a new patient form, or am I a clinic that's looking to do a referral? And he was like, well, if we go through and use ChatGPT to create the codes so we could run it on the back end, we could make it work out to where, you know, maybe we have this done in 10, 20 minutes. And I told him at the end of the day, I said, well, you might as well go and get a WordPress plugin, because you're opening up yourself to about the same amount of vulnerability at that point. So me and him are currently now working on coding that out together. He hates it, but he's got a background in security just like I do, except his background was with the military. So he's been working on that for about the last 2 or 3 days. Now we've been working on that platform, and it's taken a bit longer than what we expected, but we didn't have to open ourselves up to what ChatGPT would create. However, on the other side of it, we did use ChatGPT when we started creating some of our forms that we might use for clients when they come in to fill out the patient history forms and those kind of things. Now, we didn't have it say, hey, do this, let's copy this and put it in there, and that's the only thing we have. But we did take it as a blueprint to be able to use it, and I think it's a great tool from that perspective. But I would not use it from a coding perspective.
Yeah, you want to take this one next, or?
Yeah, on our end, we blocked it at the firewall. We caught people with the DLP doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing when it wasn't pre-approved. So we have a project going on. We just didn't rule it out. We have a whole directorate that's running a project on AI, how it can be integrated, because we're not really a bank, we're more of like investing. So some of this stuff really can't get out there, and you can't test it in the wild. There's rules against that. SEC will be really down on us. But we haven't ruled it out. We just shut it down till we can release it in a controlled manner where it can pass federal audits.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that, you know, and we talked about this at lunch, right? Life will find a way. If we don't provide a good path, they're going to follow a bad path. So, I mean, I think one of the things we keep in mind is clearly defining, one, separate your collision zones, like low trust data, high trust data, and make sure you're not blending those within the same model. In other words, you know, again, your Q&A with unauthenticated users on your website with a chatbot shouldn't be the same chatbot that has access to all your customer data, right? As somebody is going to find a way to exploit that. Even if your initial testing doesn't, somebody somewhere at some point will, if those are commingled in a model that is abstract in how it behaves. But we have to clearly define what we want people to do, and it has to be reasonable and allow them to achieve their goals. And then I think we also need to put guardrails and enforcement mechanisms, like you mentioned DLP. You know, we can use our endpoint products. There's a lot of different architectural and design models, but we want to try to enforce that people don't go do it the way we don't want them to do as well.
I think I'll add is you got to make the right path that you want your employees to do, the easiest path they can use it in. And like, that means that if you want to use AI, that means you should go out and purchase an enterprise version of them and not like the open chat GPT, because God knows what your employees are uploading to it. My bigger concern with any of these AIs is, imagine your company being scanned by one of the many reconnaissance tools out there, and then have that turn around, dump that into a chat GPT, and turn around and ask, find their vulnerabilities. That reconnaissance time goes from weeks and days to minutes and seconds that then can immediately be turned around. It's just like you're seeing it all over the place with, you know, the time of, as soon as a CVE comes out, the exploits are sometimes negative time since then, because, and it's becoming more and more often. I think it's 2019, it was 39 days, then it went down to 26, now it's down to 13 days. Like this time from announcement of it to the time that actually is an exploitable code base out there, that's, to me, that's just, the faster it gets and the less tools that we have to defend ourselves against, we just can't keep up.
How many people out there, when we talk about generative AI, have added to their acceptable use policy caveat, more than thou shalt not use generative AI irresponsibly? How many people really have a true policy procedure and actually train on it? I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do. What is the so what of using it irresponsibly? I know one of the things that I like to train on that is, so what is the whole company can quit being a company and we're all looking for a job. That's the one thing about it. The business entity has to be able to grow. If our intellectual property gets all out there because we're using it irresponsibly, our code gets out there because we're using it irresponsibly, and you have some startup who literally just copied us at half price, now we're all looking for a job. And that's one thing that I tie in, is what's the so what to me in an individual beyond like, Dow's going to have to go to HR, which could be a threat enough for most people. So just food for thought along those lines. Did anybody here have to deal with GDPR or other regulations out there that were saying, guess what, when we talked about vulnerability, guess what, in 2 days, you better go ahead and tell us if you're going to be breached by this. And I'm like, 2 days? It takes us more than 2 days at times to really go ahead and say, what's the repercussions, what network segments it was on, what data was on the segments, what customers actually were in play, not in play. To me, it takes sometimes more than the 48 hours to have a bona fide, true report on what that's going to look like versus I'm supposed to go ahead and make an announcement to everybody within 48 hours. What do you guys think along those lines? That I think is not responsible, I should say. I want to say it's unrealistic if they want a holistic response that could be publicized.
So I know it went through a lot of drafts. My understanding of the one that came out is it was, I believe it's 48 hours from the moment you make a declaration internally of material impact, right? So in other words, you might have a 6-week investigation to get to the point where you all come together and your third party agrees, yes, this is a material impact. Or it may be obvious, you walk in Monday morning and every system has a ransom note. I mean, like, sometimes it's obvious, but you're right. Like, when I first read that 48 hours, I freaked because I'm like, I can't even get through my email in 48 hours. I mean, that's not very much time.
Especially on a Monday morning.
Yeah, especially on a Monday morning.
Well, I can't comment on this one. Go ahead.
I ain't gonna touch GDPR.
Yeah, I think one other thing also on that too is a lot of times we have to see that, but we mainly be able to call some sort of incident response team as well too, even though networking, security operations center, maybe your network operating center, or maybe you as a person is wearing triple hats, trying to figure out what the ramifications are. But what does your contract say? What do your contracts go ahead and say that is the responsible way to go ahead and report that? Are you working with cloud providers that also might be able to leverage? Do you have a requirement to go ahead and call the FBI or something like that? Part of the things, I think our incident response plans have to become more holistic. What do you guys think along those lines? I think that's one thing that a lot of companies need to revamp is business continuity meets incident response, meets enterprise risk. I don't think we've done a very good job of that before 2023, and I'd like to see that be better at 2024 going forward. Any thoughts?
I mean, I'll take this right off the bat. Ours, even though we're such a young company, we still back everything up daily. We back it into the cloud, and then we also back it off the cloud. So if for whatever reason our cloud environment does get hacked, we're able to immediately go back to business operations as though it didn't happen. It wouldn't matter if somebody tried to get into our system. They really wouldn't find anything they want anyways. All of our stuff is in our EHR, and it's all browser-based. But at the end of the day, I still want to make sure that information that we are creating between forms and everything else, that stuff is protected and backed up. And that's the biggest thing I would say is your backups. You want to make sure and have them off-site and also offline so you can bring it up quickly if need be.
This is a touchy one. So I'll think of what I can actually say. One thing I do preach is exercise, practice. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when. One thing we learned after the Anthem breach was have the plans in place, exercise as an association, and have a dummy website ready to stand up to communicate, because that's when people freak out, when they get 404 error, okay, it's gone, everything's gone. But have that website placed somewhere else where if you're hit, it won't be affected and you can turn it up and just redirect. But yeah, I had that theme going on last week and they just stared at me. I'm like, don't look at me like that. It's going to happen. Don't never say it's never going to happen, because as soon as you say that, then you got to stand up and take it.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like, we need to, it's not if, but when for all of us, at least when we're preparing, right? Like, I think we should all always fight to win. Like, I don't take the defeatist mindset that we should assume we'll lose, but at the same time, we really need to be prepared. It's our job, literally. I've found that business continuity planning is the best exercise to understand the business. And Anthony just texted me a note that like a good CISO is a business partner, not just like a propeller head off in the corner, even though I'm guilty of being that sometimes. But really the BCP and creating that plan is an opportunity to have those level set discussions, because before we did that exercise, if we asked the org, like, hey, what's our recovery point objective on XYZ? Everybody had the same answer. 1 to 2 hours for max. Once we went through that exercise, we realized, oh, there's some processes we could live without for a month and we'd be okay. You know, it's not the end of the world, but these 3 things we want up really quick. It's much easier to invest in disaster recovery planning and resiliency for extremely rapid recovery when you have a short list of things you need immediately, and then what you need in 1 to 2 days, and then what things can just be whenever. So I think that we all need to have that trio you mentioned, Rebecca. We need to have a good incident response plan. And I find that those are best when they're agile, like ours is a wiki. It's not some static Word document covered in dust. It's something that we're constantly adapting and updating and that's alive. But the BCP is what helps you define your business risk, your risk tolerance. And it even leads to conversations like, hey, all roads point to this one application we defined in the BCP, and this is the one thing you said you can't live without. Let's pour a lot of extra effort, resources, definition, people into making that one application really resilient. And maybe it's 10 or 20 applications, but before those conversations, everybody says everything's important. At the end of it, you really get some true prioritization that you can work with.
Agree with everything you just said. And when you come up with like the BCP plans, I also think work with your crisis management teams and make sure you've looked at all the oddball cases. What happens when your CEO gets socially engineered? What happens when your chief legal officer gets socially engineered? What happens when the guy that has your domain admin gets socially engineered? Like those type of things. And then you couldn't have found it for a week because the behaviors looked exactly like he was logging in. Those sort of things. Like make sure you have recovery processes in for that as well.
And just to ask a little lighter question, do you guys have 3 resources that you look at daily-ish to go ahead and get you quick news? I know for me, I look at CyberWire. I have that newsletter come to me every single day. They also do brief 15, 12-minute snippets up on YouTube and different places like that will tell about the latest breach and what does that really mean. I always go ahead and look at IAPP on the privacy, what's going on that front, and I look at Data Breach News Today.
I use all those. I also have, but I use all the same ones you just enumerated. The other one is I leverage my staff a lot. Like I've been really lucky at the staffs that I've hired in the past, and they're really smart people. And sometimes you just ask them, and they get really passionate about the subject. Make sure, like if you use Slack, Discord, whatever, like put together, like for your security team, just put it there so they can put industry news in there. That's another really great way because that way you not only can look at your resources, but you'll get the best of whatever your team's looking at as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like all of those, and as well, you know, things like Hacker News, Dark Reading. But no, I mean, because we read a lot of the same things. Let's face it. But I also don't ignore those emails that are sent by your partners. Like I get updates from CrowdStrike, Cisco, Talos, Microsoft. They all send like weekly intelligence briefings. The appropriate ISACs, Arizona Cyber Threat Response Alliance. So, I mean, I think some of it's carving aside and being willing to miss or not do some other things. Because let's face it, we're all spread thin. But reading those intelligence reports, looking through them, understanding the things that apply to you are probably more important than like the 20 other things that everybody else is stalking you to do. So, I mean, I think the key to finding time to look at the resources is just figure out what things you can get away with ignoring a little bit and still be okay.
Yeah, this position I'm in now is kind of different. So we have broader teams. So we have our SOC, but then we have full-time threat hunting. And that's all they do. They get to do the fun stuff. So they do a combined report, and it goes out twice a day. And they have multiple sources in there. And you really got to read it because they don't really filter it. And something may apply, some may not apply. So I make sure I read it when it comes in because we have a lot of third-party issues. They don't know the difference. They just know it's data they found. It's really left to you to review it, manipulate it.
I use a lot of the same ones as well, but I also will listen to my briefings that come in from InfraGard. They may blow you up sometimes, but it's worth opening up and actually reading and seeing what the threat is, whether it be a physical threat or a cyber threat. because InfraGard provides both aspects of it as well. And then also, I go to a lot of briefings. I'll sit in on meetings and stuff like that they promote, webinars. They'll talk about what the status is and what some of the latest breaches are at some of those as well. So,
You know, we have to talk about hiring great staff. So I know one of the things that we talk about diversity in staff, which is different ways of seeing things. And one thing that I've been very successful on is looking at people who are doing career changes. I came from a career change. Looking at people who might have been, for example, I've hired 2 people who have been like stellar, top-notch vulnerability analysts who were both administrative assistants. Critical to detail, critical thinking, able to multitask, but always like cyber, but no one ever asked them. And so I've been able to go ahead, and 2 people in my career have been able to do that. But looking beyond the normal trajectory of ways to hiring people through the standard ways of doing things, I don't see it's really working. If you guys haven't looked for a job recently, if you look at job descriptions, they all say the same. And then people don't know what they want. I think one way to do that is actually look at some other avenues. Are there some universities that are near you? Are there universities that are near you that might not be tech, that might be having some holding gems? So how do you guys go about and find great talent today that might not be in the quote-unquote normal pool?
Sure. This is one of my favorite questions. I promise I didn't put Rebecca up to asking this. So my SOC manager, David, in the crowd, and I have like a really good inside scoop that everybody here can copy. Be adjunct faculty. Like if you're in security leadership, go teach and then poach the best students from the classroom. My last outside hire that wasn't either a re-career within IT or a student was 2017. Everybody since then has been people that were pathed new entrants in, and it's worked out really well for us. So if you want good access to talent, go teach, and then hire the best students out of your classroom.
This is a hard one. Not here to be easy. Clearly not. I mean, so far in my career, I've been really lucky to hire some really good people that then them in turn pulled their network and pulled in really good people. But I find some of them really good. Like, it has to do with their interests. I've hired a couple really good ones, even out of customer service, just because they came to me with a couple of articles about security, and they said, "Hey, I actually wrote this exploit, and I probably copied most of it off the internet, but I figured out how it worked." Like, that's the stuff that interests me. Is like it just show some curiosity about the subject and a willing to learn and willing to put time in. That works for me.
Yeah, I like to also poach. Sometimes if you go ahead and you look, not necessarily at a competitor. Yeah, they saw my camera. Shake that.
One or two in the audience that I've coached twice.
There you go. Seeing what your competitor's hiring, seeing where they might be expanding to. The other thing I do is, guys, I do a lot on LinkedIn. I like to see what our people are posting about. What articles are they reading? What people are engaging with those articles. That's important to me because if they're not engaging in any of that, are they going to be engaging in my business? So that I also go ahead and ask that when I interview people from that perspective. Are you doing the position because you need a paycheck? I'm not knocking that, but I am a vegan, so I can live on carrots for a long period of time. Or are you doing it because you love? I really think that if you follow your love at all points in time to the best of your ability, the right things will come your way. And I like the people who are more like me. If something happens, a breach or something like that happens, you'll find me up at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning reading about it and how they did it, because those rats, but it's kind of cool how they breached. People who have that really hunger, to me, are the people I also want to have on my team. Do you guys find that as well, too? You got to have that passion. So as we wrap up here, what is one golden nugget that you could pass along to everybody? My golden nugget would always follow your passion to your best ability every second of the day. And no matter if you're in our field or you leave to go in our field, life is going to treat you well.
Stay curious, and 2, especially if you're going to take any kind of security role, especially in leadership, find good people that are smarter than you and keep them around you at all times, and treat them well so they got your back, because there's a lot of threats coming at you.
Yeah, agreed. And building on the curious, like the old Cole Porter song, experiment. Like, don't wonder, don't take a vendor slide that says what's best. Build an experiment, test it, see what happens. And I'm getting thumbs from the vendor tables, so I know they like that answer too. No, but seriously, build experiments and test things out firsthand and see what you learn from it.
Yeah, for me, I've been doing this for over 40 decades. No, yeah, about 40 years. So what I like to do is be around people smarter than me where I can learn more stuff. You'll never hear me call myself an expert unless it's physical security. There I will. But IT, no. 10 minutes is going to change. An hour, you're way behind. So somebody's got to be constantly keeping up, and I like to sit down with the smart people and start listening, and they can enlighten you on what you can then turn into policy and then turn into machine or whatever. But it's the smart people. They don't have to be a lot of experience because everybody comes from a different background. I just happen to work globally my whole life. I'm retired military, so I've done this all over the planet. And each place I go, I learn new stuff that goes with that culture. And right now we're a global team, so we're pulling all this culture in from Singapore, Poland, UK, Ireland. We do have some folks in India, but yeah, that's my soapbox.
I would just echo, stay engaged, stay active, make sure that you're reading up, make sure that you're understanding what the breaches are, make sure that you're reading on some of the latest technology coming out, and then also as far as staffing goes, really come alongside your team. Really make yourself a, not confidant, so to speak, but a, not like a team player. I'm trying to think of what the word for it I would use. Yeah, mentor. Make yourself a mentor. Make yourself willing to take somebody underneath your wing that maybe doesn't understand everything, and you don't understand everything either, but you can learn from them and they can learn from you. And that's the beautiful thing about it.
Well, thank you guys for being here today. Thanks, Kim, for everybody. Remember, you're not on an island. We're all in this together. So thank you very much and enjoy your rest of your day and be safe on the way home.
Hang on just a second. Guys, first of all, we want to thank you for your time because we know you guys are busy and you're just taking your busy time out to educate these people and help them out. And if it weren't for our sponsors, we wouldn't be here. And I'm going to ask this question for them because what they want to do is get in front of you. And you guys are so busy that it's not always ideal for you guys to take time out for them. But they also have things that are going to help your life. So tell them what you look for when people approach you.
You have to know who I am, at least my business name, what my name is, and what we do. That is the quickest way for me never to talk to you as a vendor. If you're not engaged with me as a person to get to know me and my company and our values, what we stand for, I'm just $1 for the day, and so I will never do business with you.
I think you said it perfectly. Exactly the same way.
Yeah, Frank likes the steak. No, so I think one of the main things I look for is be prepared, know your product, and have a clear, articulate message. And also, don't get stuck on a party line. Adapt to what your customer says. I can't tell you the number of times. I mean, I think most of us in security leadership get at least 10 to 20 sales calls a day, hundreds of messages a week. If you happen to be lucky enough to get that 30-minute meeting, because if we said yes to everybody who says, can I have 15 to 30 minutes of your time? That's literally all we do. We'd go to sales meetings for a living. We'd have to change our job title. But if you get that opportunity, when you get that opportunity, show up prepared, be ready to demo things, have things spun up, be ready to really articulate the value proposition, because it might be 5 more months before you get another 30 minutes.
Yeah, so I concur. I've been getting emails at work I don't use my work email anywhere other than work. But it comes through work and say, I met you here, and I'm like, no, you didn't, I wasn't there. That automatically gets deleted, especially if it comes to work, because I use a wildcard email address on LinkedIn. But yeah, for me, it's just knowing what I'm actually looking for. Although I'm a geek, so I do like to learn new products and keep them in my pocket. I met a vendor here last year, this same meeting. I was wanting to contract their service, and they went cold after the first presentation. And they were good. It was a service I wanted. But that was the end of that. So I've gone to 2 others, and we finally finished on a 3rd. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
For me, it's just be relatable. Be somebody at the end of the day who, again, is passionate about my industry, because I left a job where I was making 6 figures to come into the industry and wasn't sure where we were going to end up. So it definitely changed things around of my viewpoint of mental health. And so if you're passionate about mental health and it's something that at the end of the day actually is something that you want to have a conversation with me about, as far as like how can you help us get the goal further down the plate, which is at the end of the day, people don't need us anymore at some point. I would love to be able to close our doors and say no one else needs mental health anymore. Unfortunately, that's probably never going to happen. But if you're passionate about that, then I will definitely talk to you. But keep in mind, yeah, we've got 15 minutes to have a discussion on that. So, come prepared.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. You guys, the bar's still open. Feel free to go have yourself a drink. And we're getting ready to give away some prizes.